So, we're going to start toy photography news off a little differently today because I want to address one of the comments that was left in one of my recent videos asking why is it that Hasbro gets so much crap for their crowd funds and Mattel really doesn't? And when I really thought about that, first, they're right. There are some channels that give Mattel the same crap that everybody else gives Hasbro, but overall, Hasbro does take the heat. Now, one of the reasons I thought of was Hasbro has crowdfunded a whole lot more stuff, but another reason that I can think of for me personally, and maybe some of the other people are like this, I don't care about He-Man or wrestling. Maybe that's what's going on. So when I'm looking at this stuff, I give a crap about G.I. Joe. I give a crap about Marvel and Transformers. I give a crap about Star Wars, and these are all crowdfunds that Hasbro does. Now, the crowdfunding thing in general, I don't think corporations should crowdfund, but I'm not going to sit here and say don't do it and don't spend money because I myself would be a hypocrite at that point because I have Galactus and I back the Hiss tank. But at this point, I can't think of any dream projects Hasbro could make except maybe the Havoc for G.I. Joe and the Millennium Falcon for Black Series. And my guess is neither of those are happening. So now I can get on my high horse and say, crowdfund bad. But all that aside, as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking they are right though. So maybe I should try and look at the whole Mattel Creations wrestling ring. Even though most of my critiques when it comes to any of this crowdfunding stuff tends to be on the marketing and the nostalgia-based side, because I just don't know anything when it comes to pricing. I'm sure that when it came to the Engine of Vengeance, I said subjectively that it didn't look like it was worth the money compared to Galactus and Sentinel. I'm sure I would have thrown that out there. But to say definitively, I just don't have those numbers. I don't have that knowledge. So it's difficult for me to look at this ring and even come up with marketing rationale and nostalgia rationale because I just don't have the nostalgia for this stuff. And really, I'm not even sure about the marketing rationale when it comes to wrestling things. But because of that, maybe I'm the right kind of person to talk about this ring objectively. So, I'm going to grab my iPad, I'm going to go over some stats here for it, and then I'm going to put up pretty pictures as I'm going over those stats, and I'll see if I can make a judgment on whether or not I think this Mattel Creations entrance ramp thing, not ring, entrance ramp, is a good crowdfunding idea. Okay, on first glance, checking this bad boy out, first I wanted to look at the numbers here. Right now, it's at 1,268 backers. Time remaining is 34 days. And to get the early bird, you need to get, which is a Hulk Hogan. And I think they've released tons of Hulk Hogans lately, but I don't know. Anyway, April 7th. It's got to hit 5,000 people by April 7th. And considering that wasn't a huge jump at the beginning, I'd say they might not have a shot at hitting that, and if they don't hit that, that likely hurts the campaign. Also, looking at the base of the campaign, if they get 5,000 people overall, it is just the entrance whatever thingy, and I think that's Rey Mysterio. And I don't know, like subjectively, I look at it and it certainly doesn't look like it's worth the price to me. It looks like the base might be separate pieces. It looks like what goes on top of the base looks it almost looks cardboardy. It might be plastic. I don't know. I'm kind of just trying to figure it out from pictures. I will say real quick, I would never use this Rey Mysterio picture for marketing purposes just because look at how weird the shoulders and the biceps, like that doesn't even look like a person. So yeah, for that one, I never ever would have used that picture. I would say Mattel's argument could be that there's a lot of work that goes into installing the LEDs as far as manufacturers working on putting the project together, but I don't see a lot of complexity when it comes to the sculpt itself. And I could be wrong, but looking at it right now, again, subjectively, because I don't really know the pricing or anything like that, or how much it costs to do this stuff, subjectively, I would say definitely not worth $400. But that's up to anyone else's value, if they believe it's worth that, they're gonna get it, and who am I to tell them not to? So, hey, if you dig it, go for it, but I'm not sure it's gonna fund, to be perfectly honest, and I'm not sure even if it does fund. I mean, the end result here is they want it to hit, what do we have, 11,000 backers to get everybody. And yeah, considering we're only at 1,268 and it's been a few days, and yesterday was Friday, which is when everybody gets paid, and it didn't seem to bump it much, I don't have many hopes for this whole crowdfund. So there you go. Subjectively, I don't think it's worth it. And objectively, the numbers say a lot of you kind of feel the same way. So there you go. That was me talking about the Mattel Creations WWE Ultimate Edition WCW Monday Nitro entrance stage. Whew! That was a lot of acronyms. And now, with that whole entrance ramp talk done, it's time for Toy Photography News. Well, hello there, everybody. I'm Photo Dave. This is Toypixx, and you're watching Toy Photography News for Saturday, April 1st, 2023. And yeah, one day I'm going to need to come up with an actual April Fool's Day joke, but that requires planning ahead. Anyway, before we get into the news, everything I talk about in this video, I'll have product links in the video description below. Those are affiliate links, so if you click on them and you choose to purchase something, it helps out the channel, helps out me, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, in Toy Photography News, what I do is I go back and I look at the fully revealed action figures of the past week, and I give them a photo score based on 7 categories. The first category is sculpt, the second category is paint, the third category is whether or not they come with an extra head or heads, the fourth category is whether or not they come with extra hands, the fifth category is whether or not they come with any accessories, the sixth category is articulation, and the seventh category is natural movement. Do they bend more than 90 degrees at the elbows and knees? Or if they turn at the waist, is there some kind of cut? Because if those things happen, and it's not good, it doesn't look good, there's no natural movement going on. So, now you know the things, let's get to Toy Photography News. Let's kick off these Toy Photography News festivities with NECA's Bride of Frankenstein. Now, just looking at this, looking at everything NECA does, NECA makes absolutely beautiful figures. Now, a lot of people have problems with the articulation, sometimes the paint sticks, all that. I don't have any NECA figures. I had Fugitoid. He was alright, but I really was hoping to eventually get Turtles, and those still haven't been announced. Anyway, I'm digressing. Now, looking at the Bride of Frankenstein, she is a total redo. She's a recolor, a repaint, if you will, so she's not going to get anything in sculpt. The paint looks good. She has extra head. She does have extra hands. She has accessories. She has articulation, but looking at her, looking at the mummified look here, she doesn't really have great natural movement. She gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. Checking out the Count, which I don't know my monsters, my bad. If this had been the Sesame Street The Count, it would have been acceptable because the Count, Cookie Monster, and Oscar the Grouch are actually acceptable Sesame Street characters. All the others, trash! I feel better about myself now. Now, checking out the Count. Looking at everything he comes with, looking at him, he looks really cool. He looks like all the pictures I've seen from way back when. So, giving him his photo score, we have a point for sculpt, a point for paint, a point for an extra head, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, which doesn't look all that natural. Sadly, I'm sorry, the Count. He gets a 6 out of 7. And now we have Casey Jones as the Phantom of the Opera, and I gotta say, I really like these Universal Monsters / Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mashups. Even though they don't really do great with the photo score, they do pretty well, and it's a line that I might one day go back and just grab, because the imagination behind it really, I think, is very cool. But checking out Casey here, he looks gruesome, he looks good. So, checking out his sculpt, he gets a point for paint, point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, but it doesn't look like he's got much range at those elbows. So, nothing for natural movement, giving him a photo score of 6 out of 7. And now it's time for some NECA D&D love. D&D, one of those things I just never got into. Never really been the sword and sorcery / fantasy type. Very strange. And yet, I do dig me some space opera. I'm a weirdo. Anyway, checking out Strongheart here. Looking at him, he looks good. I mean, I don't really remember the older toys or anything like that, but he looks cool to me. So just going for the old objective photo score, he gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. He has no extra heads. He does have extra hands. He has accessories. He has articulation, but it looks like we're only getting 90-degree bend at the elbows, so no natural movement, giving him a photo score of 5 out of 7. And that, ladies and gentlemen, takes us to Zarak. I don't know what to say about this little crazy guy. He's a small dude, so I feel like I can't bust him too hard on articulation, because where would you fit it all, especially when you look at him compared to the other guys? I'm like, and he comes with a lot of stuff. You know what we're looking at? We're looking at the first 7 out of 7 that's a domestic release since I started the Toy Photography News weekly thing that I've got going right now. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, that was easy for me to say, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and again, because of the mold, because of how small he is and everything else, I think he's going to be about as good as you could get when it comes to natural movement. So yeah, 7 out of 7. Good work, NECA. Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, we're now looking at some of the stuff that Hasbro has to offer. Now, I don't know how to score Xanathar and the Displacer Beast, but I thought you should see pictures because they look pretty cool. I especially like Xanathar. I just think that's weird. Weird enough to maybe fit in other stuff. And maybe you think these are weird enough to fit into other stuff. But with all that said, they did have an owlbear, and I have graded an owlbear, and he seems a little easier to give a photo score to. So checking that out. He gets nothing for sculpt, simply because he's a repaint, but also I didn't give a point to the first one for sculpt either, because he just doesn't look like what it looks like he's supposed to look like. That's a lot of look like on the card art, but I don't know. Maybe I'll be proven wrong with the movie. Who knows? So nothing for sculpt. He does get paint. No extra heads. He does have extra, like, paw kind of things. So he gets a point there. No accessories. He does have articulation. And what I can only assume is relatively natural movement for an owl bear, giving him a photo score of 4 out of 7. From Zezray Studios come these Combatants Fight for Glory figures. And just looking at them, they look awesome. I don't know what else to say checking them out. All the armor looks really good. The shine looks good. The finishes on the paint look like they look right. I don't know. These just look really cool to me. I found them on 5K Toys, which is where I found a lot of stuff for this week's edition here. But yeah, they just look really good. So, just looking at them overall, I decided to give them an overall score because they might be the same molds and all that, but they're kind of their own thing, so I did give them a score for sculpt, just because look at how crazy all that armor is. I gave them a score for paint. There are no extra heads. Those look like helmets that go on their heads. There are extra hands. They do have accessories. They do have articulation, and looking at the elbows and how limited they would be with the armor, I think that I can give them a point for natural movement. So these Combatants Fight for Glory figures, I'm giving them a photo score of 6 out of 7. Fight me in the comments. From D20 Studio and Dodo Woe, we have what I believe are samurais with just a black armor version and a silver armor version. And again, looking at these things, they look ridiculous. This is just the cool stuff that I like getting online and looking up to see, hey, what's out there and what's awesome. One thing I will say, I wish that they had maybe done their photography a little differently because the figures themselves kind of blend into the background, which is cool when you're doing a more artistic kind of thing, but I wanted to see the product a little better. But either way, just checking these things out, I like it looks right, like the silver looks like light's going to reflect off it really nicely for Pyke. The black is kind of a cheat code. As you know, if you've been paying attention to my channel for a while, you know that I kind of look at anything clad in black as, okay, that's going to just make for awesome photos. But the silver looks like it is too, so after looking at these guys, I'm going to give them a point for sculpt. They get a point for paint. There are no extra heads. There are plenty of extra hands, extra accessories. I think they've got great articulation just looking at the images and looking at the articulation scheme from what I see in the pictures, which leads to natural movement. These guys get a photo score of 6 out of 7. And then there was Mezco. I don't say much about Mezco because I feel like they think they're a massive corporation so they can get away with not having any customer service. But I haven't actually dealt with it. It's just stuff that I read online, but they never released anything about Batman. Had I ordered the Superman and he showed up with that black line around his S, I would have wanted a refund. There's just things that Mezco does that I don't like, but I can't argue with how good most of their figures end up looking. So checking out Storm Shadow here, he does look good. I can't fault him for the look. I think he looks great. But, he's going to have cloth goods, so he's probably a ninja who can't really do ninja things. Still, I'm not going to bust him when it comes to the natural movement. In fact, I won't waste any more of your time with the Mezco stuff here. He gets a 7 out of 7. It's just, when it comes to Mezco, I feel much more cautious with them than I do most any other company for whatever reason. Maybe I'm a weirdo, and if you've experienced greatness with Mezco when it comes to their business practices, let me know, because all I ever really hear about is all the bad. And now we have the Table Museum Mona Lisa, and if you saw my last video, you know that I have a degree in painting and drawing, so there was a lot of studying when it came to these kinds of things, and I think Table Museum, the Figma line, I think it's awesome. It just cracks me up. These are figures that I would go back, I'd probably buy. I might even put them in cases and just mess with them once in a while. They're just little art pieces, kind of different takes on art stuff. And you can make this figure look like she's actually the painting, or you can have some fun with her actually being a figure. It's just really cool to me. I just really dig the whole idea. Anyway, checking out the photo score. The Mona Lisa gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. She has no extra heads, but why would she? She's a painting. She's the Mona Lisa. She has extra hands. She has accessories, hence the frame. The articulation looks pretty good, leading to natural movement, which ain't bad for a translation from a 2D painting. Okay, I'm going to stop fawning over the Mona Lisa now. And now we're into the DC Multiverse, and I have to say, McFarlane Toys is really kind of stepping up their articulation game. I've been watching some recent reviews, and I think they're starting to move in the right direction. Ha ha ha! Articulation pun. Anyway, checking out Jay Garrick here. I think he looks good. There's still problems, I think, with things like their face sculpts and all that, but it's looking okay. The legs maybe are a little long, but overall, I'm not going to bust them. So, checking it out for the photo score on Jay Garrick here. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. He has no extra heads. He does have extra flash running hands. Love it. He has accessories, he has articulation, and like I say, checking out the recent reviews, today I'm giving McFarlane a natural movement point. So, Jay Garrick here gets a 6 out of 7. That brings us to Catwoman, whom I had the benefit of seeing a review of the original version of this figure, so I know how she moves. So, just checking her out, since she is a repaint, let's just get right to the photo score. Nothing with sculpt, because again, repaint. She does have a point for paint. She doesn't have extra heads, but she does have extra hands. I love that McFarlane's doing that a little more. She has accessories, because who doesn't want a Catwoman with a whip? She has pretty good articulation, like I said, saw the review, which leads to great natural movement. Catwoman gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. And now we have a Paladin King Arthur from what I believe is Coup Model. Now, I don't know if this is based on something. I assume it is. It looks somewhat familiar and has a cartoony look with a human head, but I really don't know. Still, I've always liked the idea of kings being represented by lions, so I think that's really cool. And I do enjoy, even though I'm not a big sword and sorcery guy for whatever reason, I do dig me some King Arthur, so this looks pretty cool to me. Hits me in the right spots. Looking at the figure, looks good and shiny. Just looks like he's really well done. You've got Excalibur, which of course is perfect for this kind of thing. So, let's just head over to the photo score. I gave him a point for sculpt, I gave him a point for paint. He does have extra heads, he doesn't have extra hands. He does have accessories, he's got articulation, but looking at the elbow range from the images, I think we're looking at pretty limited range, so he gets nothing on natural movement, giving him a photo score of 5 out of 7. And now we're moving over to Paladin's Black Mordred. Also very cool. Very cool. I don't even know what to say here. Now, considering they kind of are coming up at the same time, and I was looking at them, I think we're looking at mostly a repaint, but I'm not 100% sure. So, he's basically that King Arthur figure with a lot more black and gold. Looks great. I love what looks like kind of a wolf's head. It just looks angry. Looks really cool. I don't know. I think this is good stuff. So, going to the photo score. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. He does have an extra head, no extra hands, accessories, articulation, but he's got the same everything else as the King Arthur figure, so he gets nothing on natural movement, giving him a photo score of 5 out of 7. From Bob Toys comes the Greedy Doctor, and I have to say, I love what Bob Toys is doing with this line. I'm not picking them up, but looking at them, they crack me up. And I'm probably not picking them up because I missed out on Jack. But I think this looks incredible. Here's the thing, though. If you pick this up, you're gonna need to have some fava beans and some nice Chianti. And no, I'm not going to do the thing because it still creeps me out. Anyway, checking out the Greedy Doctor here on his photo score. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. He doesn't have extra heads. I think what they're showing in that image is just that head sculpt as a feature. He does have extra hands. He obviously has plenty of accessories, including a lamb. Isn't that adorable? He has articulation leading to natural movement. The Greedy Doctor gets a score of 6 out of 7. Now, I don't know how many of you out there are Quentin Tarantino fans, but I'm a big fan, and this obviously comes from the movie Inglourious Basterds, which isn't swearing because there's an E in there. Anywho, this is Brad Pitt's character. Very cool. I loved the movie. I'm sitting here trying not to, say certain words that I would get demonetized if I ever got 1,000 subscribers for saying, but it's very difficult. Here's the thing about this movie. It's not exactly historically accurate, and if you've seen it, you know that. But what's even scarier is I have a friend who's a teacher who says, I'm not kidding you, Photo Dave. There are teachers that think what happened in that movie is actually how things went down. If you know, you know, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Anywho, checking out the photo score here. He gets a point for sculpt, he gets a point for paint, nothing for extra heads, he gets a point for hands, he gets a point for accessories, a point for articulation, a point for natural movement, giving the Bob Toys Imperial Hunter a score of 6 out of 7. Next up, from Dawson Toys or Dason Toys, I don't know. We have YU006. Now, I say it like that because I have no idea what this actually belongs to. I'm sure that there's an anime that goes with this character, so let me know in the comments what it's from, but I'm looking at it. It comes with tons of stuff. It looks like its range is absolutely ridiculous. Just looks really cool. So for the 5K Toys price of $49.99, I kind of, to be perfectly honest, wonder a little about the quality. So if any of you have gotten something from this company, let me know. I'd be curious to know if the quality on these is pretty good, because looking at everything it comes with, especially when you consider what toy companies are charging today, that seems like a decent price. Anywho, This guy gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and a point for natural movement. It's a beautiful figure that gets a photo score of 7 out of 7. And now, the Pyke Soldier from the Star Wars Black Series. Looks good, looks accurate. I'm not at all offended by this thing. It would be cool if they ever made one that was more like the Clone Wars version. Those things were a little more creepy, a little more alien-esque, but I think this looks pretty good, especially considering the source material. So if we head over to the photo score, he gets a point for sculpt, he gets a point for paint, there are no extra heads or hands, he does get a point for accessories, he gets a point for articulation, but nothing for natural movement. And I fought myself a little bit on that because I thought, well, it is just a character in a movie. It's not like it's a comic character that needs this crazy amount of movement. But when I really looked at the photos, it doesn't look like he's going to get more than 90-degree bend at the elbows. So he gets a photo score of 4 out of 7. Whoo! And now it's time for the Marvel Legends section of everything. And I gotta say, I really like this cyborg Spider-Woman. I think it looks really cool. I'm not sure if I think she looks cool enough to purchase, but if I did get her, she'd just go in a section that would just be weird characters, which is still something I really want to build. I think that would be fun. So anyway, just checking her out, I think she looks really cool. But let's head to the photo score and see what the objective part of me thinks. She gets a point for sculpt, because that's wicked sculpt. A point for paint. There are no extra heads, extra hands, or accessories, so no dice there. She does get a point for articulation, and considering the bulk of this thing and all the pictures I saw of the way she moves, I couldn't help but give her a point for natural movement. I just don't think she could do much more if she actually looked like that. So I'm giving her a photo score of 4 out of 7. And now we have Jessica Drew, and I gotta say, I think the Across the Spider-Verse figures look really good. I know they're stylized and they're likely, we know that they're based off the movie, but I just like the unique looks going on here. And Jessica Drew here might be the first pregnant action figure you'll ever find in the boys aisle. Now, I say it like that because maybe there's been a Barbie that's pregnant. I don't know. Anyway, checking out Jessica Drew here, I think she looks good. That's really all I've got to say there. So, when it comes to the photo score, she gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. There are no extra heads, but she does have extra hands, which makes me happy. There are no accessories. I gave her a point for articulation, and I don't know about you, but I've been around pregnant women, and the fact that this one's even on her feet means that she probably gets a point for natural movement. Okay, that's not true. I've known many pregnant women that do a lot up to the time that they have the kid. Anywho, still, she gets natural movement, so she gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. And then there was Miles, who looks like a lot of TLC went into him. This is a good-looking figure. Again, very stylized for the whole Across the Spider-Verse thing, but I'm kind of stoked for that movie, and I like seeing pretty decent representations of things when there's media behind it. I think it looks good. I don't know what else to say there either, so let's go to the photo score. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. There is an extra head. He does have extra hands. He, however, does not have other accessories. He does have articulation, but thanks to that waist cut, if that were just a ball peg waist, he would have gotten the point for natural movement, but he doesn't, so he gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. And then there was Peter B. Parker, who looks pretty much like the figure that we got in the Into the Spider-Verse wave, except minus the coat, although there's enough other changes where I am going to give him a point for sculpt, just because he does look different enough. So, looking at the photo score for Peter B., he gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, no extra heads, he does have extra hands, no accessories, he's got articulation, and I gave him natural movement because I do think he's a redo of the original one, which means he has that ball peg waist, which means, much better Legends. This is what I want to see from Legends going forward. He gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. Ghost Spider's looking pretty good. Again, I think the team nailed it with the way these things look in this wave. It's just a good-looking wave. checking out Ghost Spider. She looks great. She looks phenomenal. I know, I'm sounding like a broken record here talking about Legends, and I've been pretty harsh to Legends the last couple months. I don't know that they've been putting out great stuff, but this wave, it looks really good. So, checking out Gwen's photo score here. She gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. She does have extra head. She does have extra hands. She doesn't have extra accessories. She's got articulation, and I fought myself when it came to the natural movement here because there's no real definition in her lower torso. So technically, we could argue that she's got natural movement, but then I remembered she's a spider character. She needs to have movement at her waist. This all led to her not getting a point for natural movement and a photo score of 5 out of 7. But alas, we've come to the one figure in this wave that I look at and just kind of think, it might look right, but it just doesn't look like it works as well as it should. This is one of those figures that if he had Peter B's articulation scheme, I would actually really dig it, but it just doesn't look like it's going to be right without that scheme. So, looking at Spider-Man 2099's photo score, I gave him a point for sculpt, I gave him a point for paint, no extra heads, he does have extra hands, no accessories, he's got articulation, but again, no natural movement on this guy, giving him a photo score of 4 out of 7. Joining Cyborg Spider-Woman in my fictitious shelf of weirdos would be Spider-Punk here. I think he looks hilarious. This is one of those figures that you just stand somewhere and people would stop at and just look and say, why? And I would say, why not? But he does have a lot of the same engineering problems I have when it comes to Marvel Legends. So, checking out the photo score, I gave him a point for sculpt, definite point for paint. There are no extra heads, and the category, friends, is extra hands, plural, and he comes with one extra hand, so I'm not giving him a point for that either. No accessories. He has articulation, but it looks like a waist twist and all that good stuff. Just a good old-fashioned waist cut, giving him nothing on natural movement. Spider-Punk gets a photo score of 4 out of 7. Closing out the wave, we have the Spot, and I really like the Spot. Just another figure that just looks weird. This doesn't have those superhero proportions that we're so used to, but still, there's something about him that I just dig. But I have to get objective with the photo score, so let's check that out. He gets a point for sculpt, he gets a point for paint. There are no extra heads, although I'm not sure what you would do for an extra head for the Spot. He does have extra hands. I love his accessories. I think that's a great idea, the way they put those together. He's got pretty good articulation, but I can't give him natural movement. Interestingly enough, if they hadn't given him just that little bit of abdominal definition, like at the top of his abs there, and I could just twist him at the diaphragm, I think I would have given him natural movement, because he doesn't look like he can do much at the waist anyway. But as it stands, the Spot gets a photo score of 5 out of 7. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the first Marvel Legends I'll be purchasing since Galactus. That's right, since Galactus. I think this thing looks remarkable. This is the first appearance Iron Man, and I know a lot of people are going to wait for the gold version. We all know that's going to happen, but for me, I thought about it. I only have one Iron Man. He's one of the red and yellow ones from Mafex, the comic one, and I figure if I end up with more Iron Man suits, they're probably also going to be the red and yellow or red and gold look. So why not get one at least that switches it up with silver? So that's why I've decided I'm going to get this one instead of the gold one. Still, looking at him, I am blown away by what the Legends team did. And I want to give him a little extra credit here, because we know how hard it is for people behind the scenes to fight to make figures like this happen. So this is kind of a reward for the people that did that. Whoever you guys are that made this figure happen, thank you. We know it was a tough fight. You won this time, and we certainly appreciate it. So, going over to Iron Man's photo score. He gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. He doesn't have an extra head, but if you have any Marvel Legends Iron Man, you should be able to figure that out and make that work for yourself. He does have extra hands, he has accessories, he's got articulation, and because it's a huge iron suit and there's a ball peg waist, I'm not giving him any crap when it comes to the natural movement. He gets a point for that, giving this first appearance Iron Man a photo score of 6 out of 7. And you know what I just did there? Not only did I just talk about the first Marvel Legend I'm gonna buy since Galactus, but I went through that whole toy photography news without screwing up any scores. I almost don't feel right about that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I've got for this week's Toy Photography News. Now comment below and let me know, what do you think of the figures I talked about this week? Do you agree with the photo score? And even more importantly, what did I miss? Because I hate when I miss stuff, and I need to know these things. But, as always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I certainly appreciate it, and I know how important time is. It's one of those resources there just never seems to be quite enough of. So thanks again, everybody, and until next time, have fun and happy snapping. See ya.